Dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 9th Greek Investment Forum organized by the Athens Stock Exchange and the American Hellenic Chamber of Commerce, which in these challenging times will be for the first time conducted digitally. First of all, we would like to thank our gold sponsors in alphabetical order: Alpha Finance, Eurobank Equities, Morgan Stanley, NBG Securities, Optima Bank, and Piraeus Securities, as well as our silver sponsor, Deloitte, for their valuable and consistent support all these years. Without them, this forum would not have been possible. We have the privilege to have with us as speakers today prestigious high-ranking representatives from the Greek and US government, as well as from the international and local press community, who will present and discuss the investment landscape in Greece in the post-Covid-19 era. So let's start immediately our program with short greetings from the organizers. And I would like to call first Mr. Socrates Lazaridis, the CEO from the Athens Group.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to welcome you to the 9th Greek Investment Forum that we are co-organizing with Greek AmCham, the Hellenic American Chamber of Commerce. Every June, we are organizing the last decade in New York City this event, and we are giving the opportunity to the management of the Greek listed companies to meet with US investors. So due to the COVID effect this year, we have decided to organize it and to switch it in a digital environment, and we are very happy that we managed to gather so many companies and sponsors for this event. US investors are having consistently since 2007 the higher participation compared to all foreigners in Athens market cap, and thus we believe it is a huge opportunity for our listed companies and for us, and also for our network. This year, in a digital environment, we have the honor to have with us 29 companies, 12 more than the previous year, and thanks to our sponsors that are presented in the bottom of your screen, we managed to have 50% more funds participating and about 2 times more meetings scheduled. Due to the different time zones, we have extended the event in 4 days, and we are having scheduled 550 meetings with over 100 fund managers participating. Before passing the floor to my colleague Nicholas, I would like to point out some figures for the Athens market. All we know that foreign investor participation is high in the Greek market, more than 65% since 2013. And the year 2020, it is the first year since 2012 that Greek investors are becoming net buyers each one of the months of this year. But still, the US investors are net buyers compared to the other foreign buyers, compared to the other foreign investors. The liquidity of the market is 15% up this year, and the velocity has increased from 30% in 2019 to 44% in 2020. Although the general index, Athens General Index, has recovered 33% from the pandemic lows, a return well above MSCI's developed Europe, there is still upward room and potential in order to catch up the December 19 values. The pandemic effect has decreased the market cap to GDP ratio at levels of 2018 and has increased the gap between the Greek ratio and the EU average at levels of 2012 and 2018. So we are allowed to argue that this may be a signal of an upcoming performance for the market, which will be similar to 2019, which is well known that Athens was the best performing market of the world. This positive, of course, potential will be supported by the EU funding, which is planned to boost the recovery of the Greek economy. Today, we have the honor to welcome in this previous session distinguished members of the cabinet and the chief economic advisor of the prime minister. And I believe that we will have the opportunity to discuss and describe the situation that is giving this potential higher expectation. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to close my introduction by saying that with the experience of almost 10 years of austerity, Greek people are facing the post-COVID era with confidence, energy, and increased resolve, and I'm wishing you to enjoy the 9th Investment Forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Socrates. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thank you for joining us in today's virtual briefing session on the investment opportunities in the post-COVID-19 era. This virtual event is organized by ATHEX and AmCham on the opportunity of the 9th Greek Investment Forum that would normally take place in New York City. The conditions under which it was organized are novel and unprecedented, but I expect that this virtual edition will be equally informative. We will miss being in New York, but it would be a shame not to discuss all the positive developments that have taken place since last year, despite the outbreak of COVID-19. The way that Greece tackled the first wave of the coronavirus with restraint, a sense of responsibility, and ultimately exceptional efficiency has won the esteem of international public opinion. Greece's legacy from the crisis might be a new positive international image, the sense that we can make it, through even the most difficult of circumstances, has helped transform the perception of Greece from being the weak link to being a strong and reliable player in the southeast of Europe, and particularly the East Med. Even before the crisis, our country had started to reintroduce itself with a new and more reliable image. The new government, elected almost a year ago, has moved quickly with planned and coordinated actions that were targeted at transforming the productive model of the country and push ahead with the necessary reforms that would allow for a better functioning of the economy, reinvigorating the public sector, forming new public-private partnerships, linking academia with business, and ultimately boosting its attractiveness to foreign investment. All this would be supported by a strong push towards the digitalization of the state. The positive light in which Greece is being portrayed, thanks to the effective management of the COVID-19 crisis, has boosted confidence in the country internationally. And this will be reflected not only in tourism, but also in promising investment interests and business collaborations. Bearing in mind the structure and condition of the Greek economy when the pandemic struck, the government responded quickly and decisively. It has made good use of the measures at its disposal in order to contain the magnitude of the immediate effect and limit the consequences of the looming recession. In cooperation with EU institutions, and most importantly, in a coordinated method domestically, it adopted measures that helped employees absorb the initial impact of shop closures on their income and secure employment levels, at least temporarily. It also took actions that allowed businesses to reduce the break-even, maintain liquidity, and deal with falling demand, supply chain disruptions, and closed borders. Most importantly, it gave everyone time to plan for the next day. As we enter the recovery and adjustment phase, the measures will of course change. To limit the damage and reactivate the economy, the government has secured liquidity now and for the months to come to support falling levels of employment by allowing greater labor law flexibility, reduce taxation to allow for lower taxable income, and decide and implement a plan to urgently adjust our country's economic model. And here I would like to emphasize a game-changing point: the push for the digital transformation of the state. The spread of COVID-19 and the subsequent lockdown forced not only the private, but also, and most importantly, the public sector to adjust rapidly to the new conditions. It was a lucky coincidence that the new government had already given the Ministry of Digital Transformation a strong mandate, and that as well as for the coordination of the various industries, it helped in quickly rolling out across sectors such as education, health and energy its plans. What would have taken years happened in just weeks. And within this sphere, I see amazing opportunities. The digitizing of processes, the reduction of bureaucracy, the implementation of reforms of the tax and legal systems. And it's not simply about transacting digitally, it's about operating digitally, remotely as well. And this is paving the way for greater competitiveness, both for the Greek companies, but also for Greece itself, which will become more and more attractive as a destination for all kinds of FDI. We have seen over the last year investment in northern Greece by large multinationals such as Deloitte, Pfizer and Cisco. This will continue as it gives Greeks the opportunity to utilize their significant skills, particularly in ICT, remotely. And this at an internationally acceptable competitive cost. It seems that the economy is reacting positively. According to the indications so far, entrepreneurship in Greece is recovering faster than expected, resulting in a refutation of the doomsday scenarios and creating optimism for better than expected financial results in 2020 and beyond. This will be assisted greatly by the EU decision to provide an unprecedented stimulus package to its member states. Given the positive track record of this new government, I expect that Greece will take full advantage of the opportunity and use the EU funds to transform the model of the Greek economy and rely less on tourism and more on other segments that would have more added value and be more extrovert. Sectors where Greece could have a competitive advantage, like agrotechnology, renewable energy, and ultimately manufacturing. The last thing I would like to mention, being an American Hellenic Chamber of Commerce, is that relations between Greece and the United States are even stronger than before, something that is highlighted by the support provided by the United States to Greece at all levels. This is starting to have positive results, helped in the most constructive way by the strong support of the US Embassy in Athens, personified by the omnipresent, untiring Ambassador Pyatt and his team at the Embassy. We thank them for their partnership. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to express the wish to see you all next year in New York and pass on the virtual floor to Minister of Finance, Christos Staikouras, who will talk to us about the challenges of the Greek economy and its prospects in the time of COVID-19. Minister?
Yes, hello. Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, Minister, please.
Do you hear me?
Yes, Minister Staikouras.
First of all, I would like to thank the Athens Stock Exchange and the American Hellenic Chamber of Commerce for the invitation. As you know, the Greek economy entered 2020 on a sound footing with promising perspectives. Unfortunately, this course came to a halt due to the coronavirus crisis, a symmetric shock globally. Since its beginning, the Greek government has adopted a comprehensive, realistic, and dynamic package of policy measures to support public health, employment, business liquidity, and social cohesion. During the lockdown period, we supported the public healthcare system and we spread a wide safety net over households and enterprises. In the current phase, covering the gradual restart of the Greek economy and economic activity, we continue to support employees and employers by expanding employment support measures, boosting business liquidity, and implementing targeted measures for sectors most severely affected by the crisis. In the next phase, as the recovery starts, we will have opportunities to launch policies with permanent characteristics building on the hard-won fiscal credibility and enhancing through the implementation of structural reforms, growth-friendly structural reforms, its productivity and structural competitiveness. Indeed, as a conclusion, Eurogroup, a couple of days ago, commended the Greek authorities for the quick and decisive policy response in taking the necessary economic and fiscal support measures. This conclusion was underpinned by 5 events over the previous couple of weeks. First of all, the successful issuance of a 10-year TGB with an interest rate similar to that of the previous October, half of that of the previous March. This constitutes a vote of confidence from the market. Second, a significantly lower than the euro area average contraction of the Greek economy in the first quarter of 2020. Third, a significantly lower than the euro area average decline in the economic sentiment indicator. Fourth, the completion of the process from one systematic bank, Eurobank, in order to implement the Hercules scheme. At the same time, deposits in the banking sector continue to increase. And finally, the successful completion of the 6th enhanced surveillance report, the third consecutive positive report in less than a year. All the above confirm that we are moving in the right direction. The total cost of the measure is estimated at 24 billion euros and may increase depending on the development of the COVID-19 crisis, as well as on the available financial and fiscal space of the country. A crucial question is how we will capture this financing needs. We have assumed fuel to implement this continued strategy. We manage domestic cash resources of the general government and executives with prudence. We successfully borrow from the market, either TGBs or T-bills, 6 months, 3 months, 1 year at the previous way. We execute the budget in a satisfactory way. We are ready to use to the best of our ability, but at the right time, the existing European financial instruments like the SURE program and the Pan-European EIB Guarantee Fund. And finally, we support the ambitious proposal of the European Commission to create a new recovery instrument, the Next Generation EU. This proposal is sufficiently rational, flexible, and in line with the challenges we are facing. Since it is mainly based on grants rather than loans, it gives every member state the opportunity to draw its national strategy. It includes common borrowing, and it emphasizes on sectors that are important for Europe's future, already included in our national reform agenda and growth strategy. Collectively, we have to do our best in order to put aside differences and disputes, to make funds available as soon as possible, and to make the best use of them in order to reset our economy and become stronger, more productive, and more competitive. Taking into account all these issues, according to the preliminary estimate of the Stability Program, the Greek economy is expected to shrink significantly, while the uncertainty globally continues to be high. However, equally important, or even more important, is the composition of growth. We need to enhance the quality of the domestic product. Greece faced for many years a significant investment gap. We We have the closing, and this priority is a bigger necessity nowadays. In this direction, we are setting forward two interrelated objectives. The first is how we will close the negative output gap, safeguarding at the same time responsible public finances. And the second is how we will improve the economy supply side, in other words, its productive capacity, in order to achieve sustainable and inclusive high growth rates with a high level of social cohesion, addressing also demographic challenges. To achieve these objectives, we have ambitious plans for the period ahead. Just to pick up some of them. First of all, the implementation of a prudent fiscal policy, incorporating a gradual reduction of tax rates and mainly of social contributions. Second, to implement a new insolvency code with several safeguards to filter strategic defaulters in order to tackle the high private debt. The third priority is to implement the asset development plan. Despite the adverse market conditions, significant progress has been made in many projects, like the privatization process of DEPA, port authorities, and Alpha Marina, as well as in the legal backdrop for land partition and demolition of buildings concerning the Hellenic project. Fourth priority, the ongoing digital transformation of the public sector, as Nicolas mentioned before, which, inter alia, will serve to further easing the administrative burden of households and enterprises. Fifth priority, the continuous implementation of the government's reform agenda, introducing 25 draft bills in the Parliament until the end of July, covering a wide range of policy actions, from microfinance tomorrow and corporate governance the following weeks, elected mobility, and endogenous sources of growth like education, research, and development. Six, the implementation of structural reforms, covering the regulatory framework for doing business, the justice system, arrears, the management of public investment, the rural policy. And seven, investment in the green economy. We have set ambitious goals in our national energy and our environment strategic plan. We are ensuring fair financing from the just transition mechanism, and we are discussing the gradual adoption of green budgetary policies and principles. Taking advantage of all the above, completing and implementing our national growth strategy, we will have the opportunity not only to recover, but to enter a strong and sustainable upward trajectory. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Staikouras, for your informative speech about the challenges and the prospects of the Greek economy. I would like now to call Greek Minister of Development and Investments, Mr. Adonis Georgiadis, and Mr. Sotiris Nikas, Chief at the Bloomberg Athens Bureau, who will have a discussion after the Minister tells a few words about the investment landscape in Greece. Minister, the floor is yours.
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a little bit sad that because of the COVID-19 virus, it's not possible for us to be all together in New York. But this is how things are now, and we'll have to adjust as everybody else. I hope next year we'll be all together in New York, and all this COVID-19 will be a nightmare that had passed. So how things are doing now in Greece in the investment level. I have to be very honest. mostly because we managed to deal with the COVID-19 crisis in a solid way and found our way out without uh, a very hard impact. Our investment landscape still stands. All big investment plans are continuing, some of them accelerating. One of the biggest that for many years they were expected to start, they are all starting now. I'll say some things more particularly after. And we have many new proposals for investments in several areas. First of all, about the investments that they were ongoing and now they are continuing and are starting. The first and most famous big urban um, new place investment, the Hellenic, as a so-called project from Lambda Development, finally has started since today. Officially, this is the day that has really started. The final ministerial decision issued by me was published in the government Gazette on Friday night. And today, the people from Lambda, with their colleagues from Intracat, they are now there and they are designing how they will proceed in the field with a real investment. This was made possible because in between, since the day of the election of 7th of July, we managed to solve several of legal difficulties that even we hadn't really expected. I have to say that I had a fantastic cooperation with Minister Staikouras because many of these legal uncertainties had to be solved from him, some others from Minister Hatzidakis, and some others from Minister Mendoni. But now the company is very pleased because what we had promised has been delivered, and the only thing that remains in order to make the transaction is the casino tender finishing this procedure because of a legal fight between the two participating companies, Hard Rock and Mohegan. This will take some more months, but as it seems now, Mohegan has won this tender, and Mohegan will make this casino in this project real. So this huge project has already started. The official opening ceremony will be in the first days of July with the presence of our Prime Minister, Mr. Mitsotakis, and with the investors from Lambda Development. And we think it's a clear signal that our economy, even this period of COVID-19, still goes on. And as a government, we can really deliver our promises, which I think it's very much important. It's in the same category. We have other kind of investment plans that for many years they were being discussed and they were never finishing. Cassiopi Project, one tourist project of 100 million euro in North Corfu, has started in 2012. For many years has been announced. All the licensing finished, and all the court has been won from the investor. So I issued the last ministerial decree some days ago, and we will have an opening ceremony in this project in North Corfu in the second weekend of July. And in this case, the investors are very happy because after many years they found a government that were ready to hear their problems and interfere to the services and even legislate if this was necessary in order to bypass all the obstacles and make their dream a reality. In the same level, I can tell you that some other big projects they have already started, and I'm very proud because my ministry helped a lot. With my deputy minister, Mr. Pathanassis, who will be in Hermionida in Peloponnesos on Thursday, and Friday morning we'll have the opening ceremony of a big real estate tourist project in Kyllada Hills a project of almost 500 million with a golf resort and a very luxurious hotel and beach houses. This was one of the projects that was the licensing was faster than ever during my term here in the ministry. On the last weekend of June, we will go to have the opening ceremony in the Lunda of Mirum, the company is Mirum in the Lunda in Crete. It's another big investment that the licensing um, happened during my term. I still remember the investor that came in my office on August 19. His lawyers told him that he would need something like 1.5 years to have the license in order to start. We issued everything in less than 4 months, and now he has hired the company to build his hotel and beach houses, luxurious hotel, of course, in Lunda, and they will start digging the last weekend of June. Beyond tourist investments, Costa Navarino is another one that has been expanded during this period, and many others. One of the key investments that made us very happy was Blackstone, that, as you know, on September they decided to buy 5 hotels in Greece from Louis Hotels. We interfered very much in this process. We helped them to finish their job. Now the transaction has been completed, and we're in touch with the company to make the licensing of renewing these hotels much faster in order to start their renewing process in summer of 2020 in order to be ready for the next tourist period in 2021. And many other smaller projects around the country has been accelerated and go very fast. In the renewable energy, with Mr. Hadzidakis, we managed to issue a lot of new licenses, and we had a new law on March that accelerated all the procedure. I will give you an exact timeline to understand. With the old legislation, when you wanted to have an implant of solar or wind energy, you could take for the licensing procedure approximately something like 5 to 7 years. In the new legislation we have, you can finish all the process in 6 to 7 months. And the first phase of the procedure that starts from my ministry, before it was approximately 1.5 year. Now we finish everything in less than 20 days. So in this field of renewable energy, we have been very efficient. We go very fast, and because of the decision of our Prime Minister to decarbonize our energy sector in the Western Macedonia and in Peloponnesus, we will have already one authority under Mr. Mousouroulis that coordinates all these projects there, and we give many incentives to the new European program, a lot of co-funding for big renewable energy projects, especially in Western Macedonia and in Peloponnesus in the area of Megalopolis. So we can have and offer a lot of opportunities in this field. In industry, as you know, during my term, an American company, Onyx Shipyards, managed to finish the procedure that has started through the previous government, and they bought Zero Shipyards. They are now a very profitable company. Many of the Greek ship owners came back and gave work to this shipyard, and now this company, Onyx, maybe, to be honest, as we speak, I mean 10:30 DC time, if I calculate good, it's something like now. In the board of DFC, they are deciding to start the procedure of helping Onyx with funding to buy LFC Shipyard, which is another big shipyard company project that, if it will finish, and we're very optimistic that with DFC's interfere and United States government decision and the approval from the committee of the Congress and with the vote of the Democratic Party, we will have a success, and in the months to come, Onyx shipyards with the American government will have the LFC shipyards under their authority, and they will start renewing the shipyard there and build ships and renew ships there. So it's a very important news because LFCs and shipyards of Sirius together, they are an important hub of shipyard in the Eastern Mediterranean. And of course, through the Minister of Finance, I don't know if Mr. Taikouras mentioned it before, I didn't see it at the end, Mr. Taikouras has a tender of the Skaramagas shipyards, the other side, that goes very well, and it seems that we'll have a success around the end of this year. So with all these plans together, we will have again an important shipyard industry in Greece after many decades. To be exact, after the decade of 1980s, which was the decade that we lost a lot of jobs and industries in Greece for various reasons that I don't want now to refer to. At that time, we have already passed a law from the Ministry of Development and Investments that gave us the full authority to give licensing to big investment plans, as we call strategic investment plans, in a fast track procedure. At the end, we can press all the services to finish in a fixed timeline. If they don't do, they have some punishment. And if at the end the Minister of Development decides that this is a big plan and he wants to interfere, he can issue the license himself. I mean, the Minister of Development, me now, and whoever will be in the future. This gives the authority to the Ministry to interfere in the procedure of licensing very, very fast and accelerating the procedure. And everybody now knows that if they are delaying, they cannot stop an investment because the Ministry is above and can help do it. In this same law, we made much more simple to open an industry. We made much more simple to open an enterprise. In the world, in the doing business World Bank indicator of how easy it is to open a business now, Greece is the first country in the European Union, the faster. We have worked in a very strong way with the World Bank experts during these months to improve Greece's position in doing business rate. Of course, many of the legislation we had to pass, they were planned to pass on March and April, because in the doing business indicator, the things you do until the end of May count. So many of the things, because of the COVID-19, at the end didn't pass because we closed the parliament and we couldn't coordinate as we wanted. But even now, with the things we have already done, we're very optimistic that the doing business indicator risk will be much, much higher than it was in the previous year. And of course, when we finish our job next year, even much, much higher. The main idea and the main philosophy of this government is to transform the country to a very business-friendly country. We want to send a clear signal to everybody that we respect other people's time and money, and we are here to help them do their vision possibility. Beyond all that, I have to refer also that we have tenders ongoing for DEPA infrastructure that goes very well and hasn't stopped because of the COVID-19. For ELVO, the national vehicle company that has that is continuing, and we think that will have a success also there, even though during Syria period it had been cancelled twice. And now we're very optimistic, and tomorrow in our trip in Israel with the Prime Minister, we'll see some of the potential buyers of ELVO. Now we're opening a tender for the ports of Alexandroupoli and Kavala. Through Taipei, then with Mrs. Taikouras, we're organizing a tender for the casino and hotel in Gournes in Heraklion, Crete, which is a fantastic piece of land in North Crete, beyond the sea, that will give a license also for a casino and a luxury hotel. A project approximately 500, 600 million euro, even maybe more. This will start during this year. For sure, it would have already started or having stopped for this COVID-19 reason. And the other thing we're doing under the Prime Minister decision, I'm the president of the Bi-Ministerial Committee that we're working very hard the last weeks to change the 4412 law of public infrastructure and public tenders. The direction that we will change this law will be less bureaucracy, faster procedure, easier for someone to participate in the tender. We want to accelerate all the big infrastructure, public infrastructure projects or PPP infrastructure projects as fast as possible during 2020. We think that this will give the opportunity to many investors to come and to participate in all these kind of tenders. So the general investment environment seems very good. Of course, there are liquidity problems uh, due to the COVID-19 crisis. Our government has taken a lot of measures, especially between Ministry of Development and Ministry of Finance. We gave some very low interest loan through the Ministry of Finance to our businesses due to May 2020 and now June 2020. These two rounds of this kind of loans will come to 2 billion euro. Here in the Development Bank, we made a project of giving money to pay the loans of the business loans of all the companies that they were already they were good with their banks for a 3 month period until July, and we have the money needed to pay 2 months more until September. We have already started and finished a procedure of 2 billion loans with interest rate of the two first years that being paid by the government, by the Development Bank, up to 2 billion. So it's 4 billion with the other kind of loans from the Ministry of Finance. And now it's ongoing a process of a guarantee loan by 80% from the state, from the Development Bank, up to 7 billion euro for business liquidity also only. So altogether, it's a tool of 11 billion euro. Until the end of June, we'll have a new tool with EIB that will give approximately 1 billion euro loans for investment reasons into Greek business that they want to invest more money. And through the European Union services, we took license to increase the level of the money, the budget, and the tax relief we can give through the development laws a lot. Before the COVID-19 crisis, we could give under this law no more than 500 million per year, and this has been expanded to 2 billion. So, almost all the plans that will apply business plan that will be applied the Ministry of Development, and they will take a tax relief or money from the ministry in order to make this business plan a reality. All these measures were designed during the COVID-19 crisis and with very good cooperation with the European authorities. Of course, we wait the final European decisions for the budget and the procedure that will come to member states as a tool that will help our economy to recover after all this shock of the quarantine measures and everything else. You know that the Commission's proposal is 22.5 billion to Greece and another 10 billion for loans with a very low, even negative interest. It's a big amount of money, but it hasn't been really reassured yet because it needs a decision of the prime ministers and the leaders of European member states. But this will happen in the days to come. I think we have a clear thing about what they are going to do with this. We are ready. We are working with Prime Minister's office very hard. From this side, the Alexis Patelis that will follow will sure tell you much more about how we think that we can use all this help and all this money. Our main idea is that we don't want just to spend the money to be, let's say, good to our voters. We want to use this money as a chance to revise and reorganize our economy in a more efficient and competitive way. We have hired some high efficient professors, as Mr. Pisaridis, Mr. Vedas, and others in a committee to give us the direction that we can really plan a real master plan of our economy that will transform our economy to a much more efficient way in the years to come. And we're very ready to do what we have to do, even to be not very pleasant to some of our voters that, of course, many of them would maybe imagine just to take the money and spread them over, but we want to use them in a very, very efficient way. So, thank you very much, and I'm here to answer to any questions you have.
Hi. Ahead of our discussion today, Mr. Georgiadis, I spoke to several analysts and representatives of foreign banks to see what they are actually looking to hear from you. No surprise here, it was all about Hellenic Project, and you pretty much said everything that they wanted to hear from you. One thing that I would like to ask you is, given that this government is a pro-business government, it took almost a year for you to clear the investment. So this means that investing in Greece is still facing some difficulties. What are the initiatives that you are planning to do to make doing business even easier for investors? I mean, you already mentioned what are you doing. I mean, is there anything further that you're planning to do?
Yes. First of all, to say some things about the Hellenic project. I'm sure that in any country, if an investment of this scale into a city, and maybe and even into the capital of that scale, would be very complex, because you had to reorganize several services, several ministries, and many other people, municipalities and public services, and almost even the church interfered in that. Everybody had something to say about this project because it's very big. So I don't think that having 9 months, and in these 9 months, 2 of them under quarantine of COVID, such a big time. I think we were fast enough. And to be honest, Lambda Development, the investors, they were very happy about how fast we were. The reason that we were so fast helped them to gather the capital they wanted to gather at the end of 19, if you remember. They gathered a huge amount of money, 650 million. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't have gathered this amount of money if we were slow. They had the money because they could show to their shareholders that we were really meaning what we were saying. So I'm proud to say that we finished it in 9 months. I think it was okay. If you understand how complex this project was, with a casino tender in between, with the municipalities around and everything. So for me, that we managed to deliver our promise in less than a year from the election, it's a clear signal that we can deliver and we mean business. So, in order to make things simpler for the future, we have already made 2 big legislation, one from my ministry and one from the Ministry of Environment, that gives in the 2 ministries the authority to accelerate licensing procedure and, let's say, canceling a lot of the bureaucracy that was in the past. Now, it's much easier to do your job if Lambda development would come under this legislation and had started now. I remind you that Hellenic project practically started in 2013, and we're starting the field
7 years later, almost 7 years.
7 years later. If they would start at 2020, the same project, it could start in less than 3 years. So it's the half of the time.
Okay. What else is in your reform agenda? What should we expect until next June when there is going to take place the 10th Greek Investment Forum?
Our appetite for reforms is huge. With Mr. Patelis, with Mr. Patelis, we always talk a lot about what we have to do. And I have to reassure you that our main idea and Prime Minister's will is to use a huge political capital that he now has, because the truth is that the political environment in Greece now is that the government of Mr. Mitsotakis, today, it's much more popular. It's much stronger than it was 1 year ago when we had the elections and we won with 8.5%. So Mr. Mitsotakis wants to use this political capital in order to make a lot of breakthroughs and change things that in Greece was always much more difficult to be done for political reasons. So you will see in the weeks to come, even the reform of 4412 I was mentioning before, for example, will be a huge reform, a pro-business reform, and others that will come in the labor market and almost everywhere in order to make our country much more business friendly.
You know, I also wanted to ask you about the EU funds that are coming now due to COVID, but you already said that Mr. Patelis perhaps will elaborate more. So I think
I like Mr. Patelis very much. He helps me a lot here in my job, and I have to tell you here what he will say because he's a serious guy.
One last question from my end. You said that there are also new proposals, new investment proposals. I guess you won't be able to say what are these proposals and from whom are coming these proposals, but can you at least elaborate a bit on the sectors of the economy that these proposals?
They will be announced no more than 15 days from now, because we will approve this kind of proposals through the Prime Minister Committee of Strategic Investments, in which I have the presidency. So they will be publicly announced. They are in the sectors of logistics, of renewable energy, and tourism.
Okay. I think we can pass the floor to the next panel. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I was very honored participating here.
We thank very much Minister Georgiadis and Mr. Nikas for their interesting dialogue. Thank goodness the sound was good. And I would like now to call Mr. Alex Patelis, Chief Economic Advisor to the Greek Prime Minister, and Mrs. Swacha Patnaia, Global Economics Editor, Reuters Breaking Views, who will have a discussion on the Greek economy and the government plans going forward. Mr. Patelis, Mrs. Swacha, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, virtually at least. And Alex, a huge hello from London. Lovely to see you again.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Perfect. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the organizers too.
You had a huge build-up, actually, with the minister in the previous session, who you probably heard, talking about reforms and how much you've helped. We'll get on to that. Let me ask you a little more specifically. Every time over the past decade, we've seen the Greek economy get off its feet, start recovering, getting over really difficult hurdles. It's dealt a huge setback. The same thing's happened, unfortunately, this time with the pandemic. What do you see for the Greek economy in the next year or two? And how does this affect, very specifically, as the Minister was saying, the sequencing of the reform agenda, which was so important for the Mitsotakis government?
Thank you very much, Swahan. I wanted again to thank the organizers of this event and to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody who's watching in, and hoping to be with you in London and in New York and wherever else you may be soon. And of course, to wish everybody and their loved ones to stay safe in these difficult times. Now, also want to mention very quickly, I'm a huge fan also of Minister Georgiadis. He's known as the resident troubleshooter. When there's something wrong, he jumps in and solves it, and we share a lot of common values. So in terms of your question, very pertinent one, we had Greece in February had the highest, I don't know if you know this, the highest manufacturing PMI of any of the 41 countries that market PMI follows, and had the monthly economic sentiment at its highest level since 2007. So the economy was flying, and then this COVID crisis hit. And of course, I'm going to focus on the economic aspect of things. Of course, as a government, we're not there to only solve problems when things are good. We're there to solve problems where things are not going our way. And this was one of those unexpected events. Fast forward a couple of months, we are happy to report that Greece is, I checked this earlier today, is number 83 in the list of countries of deaths per capita as ranked by Worldometer. So this was a symmetric shock, as many policymakers like to put it, and we feel that from a epidemiological standpoint, let's say, we did as much as we could have. And I do think that this is going to matter in the medium term. One of the issues that investors in Greece always had is when they thought of the distribution that you have in any kind of investment, you had this tail risk with Greece. That was always something that could turn out to be negative. And here we have the deepest economic recession globally since the Second World War, and Greece is not standing out in any particular way. So we'll take this as a given, as a positive, and we'll try to take advantage of that. Now, of course, we still have the reality, which is that we do have a deep recession, and the question is, how deep is it going to be? We do not share some of the more pessimistic forecasts out there, and we definitely do not believe that Greece is going to be at the bottom of the league. And I can give you a number of arguments. I will say that probably the most important one is that not enough attention has been placed on the magnitude of the lockdowns, the duration of the lockdowns, and the economic effect that has. The countries are not, they went into this crisis that was very symmetric, but they have not responded in the same way. Greece has started to ease restrictions in early May. We're now mid-June, so we're nearly a month and a half into this easing. We follow the data on electronic transactions quite closely, and similar statistics, mobility statistics, and other big data statistics that everyone's following. And we can see that the economy is rebounding. We have the precedent of China, which started easing lockdowns in mid-March. So we have a little bit more information to compare. And I think Greece is doing better than what the Chinese experience was. So I would add to that the Greece having gone through a 10-year crisis. The surviving companies are the best in class. They had to deal with a 25% decline in GDP. And so for them, having an unforeseen shock is not something new. A lot of the surviving companies have much less debt. They're not as levered as elsewhere. Greece did not participate in the global credit boom of the 2000s. And so they have not come to us with the same type of requirements. I will give you, or requests, I'm sorry. I will give you an example. the Greek government has not yet injected equity capital in any private company. And that's mostly because we've not really had such a request. And we feel that that the structure of the economy has actually been some help. Now, you mentioned the second part of your question. I apologize. Further to
it was about the sequencing of reforms.
Yes. So here we have a situation where obviously first we had to deal with the health aspect of the crisis. But as Minister Georgiadis mentioned at the previous panel, this government was elected on a platform of reforms, and this is what we have been doing. The government has passed about 70 bills through Parliament so far, so it's nearly 1 year into its term, and we have another 19 bills waiting in the pipeline to be voted, but they might not be able, there's basically not enough time in Parliament to do it before the summer recess, but it's all continuing. During the crisis, or recently, let's say, we've had a number of important initiatives. We had an environmental bill that was passed that sharply curtailed the expected duration for granting environmental licenses, which is very important, particularly for a lot of the renewable energy projects that we need to attract into the country. We also simplified the institutional framework for renewables. We've had a lot of efforts done in digitization, obviously because of COVID, but also irrespective of COVID. We have the Ministry of Digital Reform basically trying to digitize everything that has to do with the Greek state, and they have been at it. And there's another bill, digitization bill, coming to Parliament soon. We have a spatial bill coming as well. In terms of stuff that might be more relevant to our audience, we will be finally introducing the corporate governance bill that we've been promising. This upgrades corporate governance structure in Greece quite soon, and also the single insolvency bill, which reforms the way restructuring and bankruptcy is done in the country. And both of these bills should be voted by, let's say, mid-July or so. We have a bill on microfinance that has entered Parliament just now. Let me see, what else? Oh, of course, we had an education bill that was voted, and actually in the room next to the one that I'm sitting at right now, the Prime Minister is having a teleconference with 20-odd representatives of 20-odd US universities who are interested in developing relationships with Greek universities, because one ability that we're granting to Greek universities is to finally develop joint programs and to also offer degrees in other languages, in English, that might interest students who are not necessarily Greek. One of the ideas that we have is to, when people talk about tourism and the dependency of the country on tourism, we want to broaden that out. Education tourism is another example of what you can do. So why shouldn't people come and study in Greece? I see no reason why they shouldn't, as the way they do in other countries. Greece has always been an exporter of students, so it's about time we import some as well. Maybe I should mention here that the whole idea of tourism needs to be broadened out. We could include silver tourism, attracting pensioners to come and retire in Greece, medical tourism. The health system actually did surprisingly well, and I say surprisingly because a lot of people were fearful that it wouldn't be able to cope with COVID. And of course, we have the non-dom program that we passed. And maybe I will end my comments with a more general and important comment. And again, it ties into what Avamis said in the previous panel. And that is that during the crisis, we lost about 800,000 Greeks who left Greece for a better future somewhere else. These were among some of our brightest, and we want them back. And hopefully this crisis will be one of the first instances where they might have been better off if they had been in Greece than elsewhere. So we want to cement on that and create the jobs and the environment that will make them want to come back.
Absolutely, and I guess not being able to travel to come back and see family makes it very important to actually perhaps be home again and recognise the benefits of that. Let me turn a little bit to the finance side. You've spoken on reforms already. So austerity fatigue had already set in well before COVID-19 hit. The pandemic has seen governments across the political spectrum and around the world spend a lot of money to protect their economies from the impact of the imposed lockdown that they have imposed, in fact. Now, that's a problem perhaps for countries like Greece, like others in the Eurozone, say Italy, which started with a high debt to GDP ratio and are going to emerge from this crisis with an even higher one, unfortunately. How do you think governments, and more particularly financial markets, will look at the issue of debt sustainability once we're eventually through this crisis?
Thank you for that question. It's a very interesting and pertinent question. Obviously, recessions, as an economist, I can tell you that recessions leave behind them higher debt levels, and that's been the case in the past. This has been a symmetric shock across the world, so it's going to happen everywhere. In a strange way, and please don't take this the wrong way, in a strange way, we're all Greek now, in the sense that many countries are becoming indebted. Now, the Greek debt had and continues to have some very peculiar characteristics that make the headline debt to GDP number highly misleading, in our opinion. Of course, we have 20-odd year average duration of debt. We have over 80% of the debt held by European institutions effectively. And we have little noticed through a series of swaps, the vast majority of that debt now fixed. So the profile of the servicing of the debt, if you look at it on a sort of chart, it's really not that worrisome. And you have, a couple of bumps and kinks here and there, but it's something between 5 and 10 billion per year forever, basically. But what you have now is a global recognition of what to do with debt, government debt, and private debt. And obviously, we don't know what exactly is going to happen. It's going to take years to unfold, but it's obvious that the initial policy response globally has been the same, and that is central banks have lowered interest rates, they've expanded quantitative easing, and of course, in Europe, we have there is forward on the table the recovery fund proposal, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a moment. But for Greece, Greece was recognized and joined the quantitative easing program back in March, and of course that program has now been extended to the period at least until June 2021, with reinvestments at least until December 2022. And I'm looking today at the yields, and we have 10-year Greece at 1.22% right now, and 10-year Italy 1.43%. So we're very happy about that. But I would say that the debt profile was different to start with. Now, one of the side effects, let's say, of having gone through a 10-year crisis that was originally triggered by budget deficit is that you'll become fully aware of the risks and of the opportunities of government spending. This government has been prudent from the beginning. They had to balance between the obvious Keynesian need for supporting the economy with the reality of not overburdening the government debt in the medium to long run. I think we feel comfortable in any case that we've struck a good balance. I think also the quality of spending matters, as does the speed. I think we will find that the efficacy of fiscal stimulus programs is not always the same. From the beginning, we felt that we had, let's say, I would put it, you had three phases. The initial phase when the lockdown was taking place, and that phase you just had to basically support people who did not have a paycheck and support firms so they don't go bankrupt. We then have the period that we're going through now, which is the period in which you're opening up the economy. And here the emphasis is to not create unemployment that could create a hysteresis type effect later. So we've implemented Sinergasia, which is a short-term work scheme that tries to support workers' wages by subsidizing wages. And so companies and businesses that have lower demand than normal could employ those workers for fewer hours than normal, and the state comes in and covers a large chunk of the difference. And of course, we've also instituted a number of loans, business loans. The government has given out 600 million and is giving out right now another 1.4 billion loans to SMEs primarily. And this is based on a formula, so it can happen quite quickly. And it's based on how much your turnover had declined. And then the government's also giving 2 billion guarantees to the banks that are giving out loans of about 7 billion, both for SMEs and for larger companies. And the banks choose what criteria they're going to use. And then in the third phase, which will come, let's say, after the summer is over, you then want to, once there's more clarity, you want to give incentives and you want to kickstart the investment process. Although, as Adanis mentioned before, you know, investments into Greece have not stopped during COVID. We had the investments by Applied Materials, by Microsoft, by CVC, by BCP Partners. We had the closure of the Marina Alimos privatization, and as Adanis said, there's 3 more investments to be announced, and so we hope to continue down that path.
Let me touch on that briefly and pick up on the point you made about the EU recovery fund plans. This was called a Hamilton moment by some people when it was announced. I think that might be overriding the pudding a little bit, but how important was this? And more importantly than this, do you think that solidarity, the show of solidarity, will persist even after the coronavirus pandemic is over?
I missed the beginning of your question. Sorry, just the first couple of words.
The Hamilton moment. I'm not sure it is a Hamilton moment, but how important was it, do you think? And will it
when we look back at the crisis, at the beginning of the crisis, there was a lot of doubt that Europe would pull itself together. But I do have to say that the experience of Greece has been throughout the crisis, the past 10 years, that Europe has shown a lot of solidarity. And of course, this was a symmetric shock, and I think Europe has performed quite well. I'm talking about policymakers' response to this. And if we look back at what's happened, we have a very swift and broad response by the central bank, the ECB, and also by the regulators, the SSM, in the direction of what economic textbook policy would tell you, easing monetary policy and loosening on regulatory constraints. And then on the fiscal side, we now have the proposal of the so-called recovery fund. Of course, the recovery fund has not yet been fully agreed, and we have a leader summit later this week, and then probably another one in early July. But we are optimistic that the deal will be sealed, and it will be more or less what we're hopeful that it will be more or less what the Commission has proposed. I think if you look at the broad size and you sort of think about what should be the ideal number, I think it's fairly reasonable. Obviously, you can always disagree here and there, but in the grand scheme of things, it's more or less what the doctor would have ordered, so to speak. Now, it is important, what I said before is very important, quality of fiscal policy. It's very important that each country utilizes this recovery fund in a productive manner. And of course, I have been personally struck how much the media in Greece, how prevalent the call is to be able to make sure that the monies are not wasted, as it might have been sometimes in the past. And as a government, we're working very hard to ensure that. We're going to spend basically the whole summer putting together a plan and formally propose it in the fall. And of course, the Prime Minister has also said that we will continue working with the committee of experts that has been formed under Professor Nobel Laureate Professor Pisaridis and others who will give us their report. Well, they had given us a preliminary report back in February, and they will work and extend on that. And so the quality of fiscal policy matters. I think to answer the latter part of your question, if you take a very bird's eye view of Europe, I think you will find this crisis once again has fallen into the general pattern of crises moving things forward. And so 10 years ago, nearly to this week, there was a front page, excuse me, a front page of Newsweek magazine that was titled "The End of the Euro" and had a petrol bomb. Someone, obviously somewhere in Athens. Fast forward 10 years, Newsweek is no longer in print, but Greece is still in the euro, and the euro is still going. So if you sort of look at it from the beginning, the European project has always been a combination of political and economic and cultural and social advances, and at every crisis we've gone a step forward. So in answer to your question, no, I don't think this will unravel when the crisis is over. Quite the contrary, I think we have seen that every crisis builds on the achievements of the previous one. And yes, there was a lot of disagreements at the beginning, but this is healthy debate. And what's come out, I think, is good. One aspect of the recovery fund that has probably not received enough attention is because of the recovery fund, the ECB is no longer the only game in town. And what that means is that all else being equal, the ECB doesn't have to do as much as it would have. And so if you think about risks, I mean, if you think about as an economist, you know, what is the optimal response to a crisis? Well, you just don't know. So sometimes when you don't know, it's a good idea to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of the other. If we had only left it onto the ECB, they would have probably had to print even more money and probably take on more risks. And this could have created more financial and inflation risks later on. So I think a more comprehensive approach probably is best for battling risks in the medium to long run.
You segued into it very easily, actually. You're talking about the Eurozone proceeding from crisis to crisis. Very briefly, society also sometimes makes great leaps forward when it's dealing with crisis. COVID-19 has accentuated some of the inequalities, accentuated definitely some of the anger about socio-economic inequalities.
I'm afraid we can't hear you properly. I don't know if I'm the only one who can't hear you.
About the inequalities in society.
Yes, go ahead.
So the inequalities in society have been accentuated by COVID, and there's a lot of anger. And crisis may also change the economy. Can I ask you very briefly, unfortunately we're nearly out of time, but how do you think the Greek government's vision for rebuilding the economy can take this into account and build it differently, perhaps?
Yes, and the issues of inequality were always central to us in designing the fiscal response that we have, but also, believe it or not, in some of the health decisions. For example, the decision to reopen schools was also based on the idea that children in less privileged families wouldn't have as much access to some of the digital means that those more privileged might have. And this was certainly one of the arguments in favor of opening up schools earlier rather than later. Similarly, doing a short-term work scheme and protecting, wages, workers' wages is also very important. I want to take a little bit of a different twist to your question and also advertise. We have a conference coming up on the 25th of June, a digital conference titled Human Rights in the Workplace. And I think one thing we want to promote is the idea that diversity can also help both economic growth and prosperity. And it's sort of a twist on the inequality idea, but we very much believe that everybody should be given equal opportunity. And to the extent that someone might face discrimination, whether on the basis of their gender, their race, their sexual orientation, or other dimensions, that obviously leads to a suboptimal economic outcome. And so as a country, we want to make sure that everybody can participate in economic growth and prosperity.
Thank you for that. On that note, it's really unfortunate we're out of time because I think you could tell us a lot more about it. But let me thank you, Alex, for joining us, and thank you all for joining us for this session. I'll hand back to our hosts in Athens. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Patelis and Mrs. Patnaia, for your fruitful discussion. Now we will watch a video recording of a discussion of the U.S. Ambassador to the Hellenic Republic, Mr. Jeffrey Payat, with Mr. Fanis Papathanasiou, Anchor, Senior Diplomatic Editor from ERT Greek Public TV. Ambassador Payat is a fervent supporter of our forum for the last 4 years, and we warmly thank him for that.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you for this opportunity, for this chat for the 9th Investment Forum.
Thank you.
Let's start with the, we have almost 1 year anniversary since the last year's elections. Of course, in a different international, domestic, and social environment with a lot of volatility, a lot of uncertainties. How do you judge your cooperation with the Greek government, Prime Minister Mitsotakis, and also how do you judge your cooperation in the stance of the opposition leader, Mr. Tsipras?
It's a good question. And I remember a year ago, during the last ATHEX AmCham Roadshow, I did an interview like this in New York City. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I was very bullish about U.S.-Greece relations, but I think I was not sufficiently ambitious in terms of the vision that I set out. I'm very proud of all that we've accomplished in the past 12 months since the election of the new government. You can see how quickly the Trump administration responded to the Prime Minister's election. We had Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross here just a few weeks after the election. We had Frank Fannin, our Assistant Secretary for Energy here, Phil Rieker, our Assistant Secretary for Europe. And then we've kept up.
Secretary Pompeo.
Exactly. Then we tried to set a very ambitious agenda for our engagement in both directions. It was terrific that we had Foreign Minister Dendias in Washington, D.C. on his first international trip. I think it was about 9 days after he was sworn in. We were able to get Secretary Pompeo here for the strategic dialogue in October. We had the Prime Minister in Washington for a fantastically successful visit in January, along with a lot of the key ministers, including Minister Georgiadis, Minister Kerameas on education, where we've accomplished a great deal together. I think we benefited from the fact that Greece was able to move very quickly, and the government was able to move very quickly in terms of building an even stronger reform agenda, taking a relationship that was already good and raising it up to the next level. We're very excited about everything that we've gotten done on the high technology front with Minister Perakakis. The fact that this government accomplished in 12 months what we had not accomplished in 12 years in terms of getting Greece off of the USTR 301 list, in terms of moving ahead with big new investments from major American technology companies like Microsoft, like Applied Materials from Silicon Valley. Clearly, the digital transformation of Greece has begun, and American companies have played a critical role in that. We have the defense and security relationship, which was already very strong and has moved ahead with the expansion of our defense cooperation agreement. You saw I was in Suda Bay just on Friday with Minister Paniatopoulos and the Chief of Defense. So I'm very proud of what we've accomplished. I think it's helped by the fact that in both countries, there's strong agreement on the importance of this relationship. As I said, what we've accomplished with this government built on a foundation that was laid by Syriza, and likewise in the United States, both the support from the administration, from the White House, from Secretary Pompeo, but also very strong support from the Democrats, especially Senator Menendez, who led the charge for the East Med Act, which I think will be remembered over the long term as a really significant symbol of how our relationship is maturing.
Okay, now we are in a different environment right now with a lot of volatility. There is actually this week a crash test from Greece is opening to tourism. Mitsotakis yesterday from Santorini says Greece is a safe destination. Greece opens to mass tourism. Of course, I have a lot of friends in the United States. It won't be easy this year. What the American government could do to help Greek tourism?
So the first thing I will emphasize is how impressive it has been to see the way in which this government managed the global pandemic. The COVID crisis is one which nobody predicted. And the fact that Greece was able to position itself so effectively by listening to the scientists, by moving early to a regime of social distancing, and by relying on the discipline of the Greek population. And I think Greek citizens have a lot to be proud about as well. There are reputational gains, which Greece has enjoyed because of that. I'm also very proud of the role that American technology and American science is playing in helping to shape the Greek response, the sort of technology dashboards that the Prime Minister has used. Prime Minister's been clear that Greece's approach to reopening is going to be data-driven. I think that's the right way to approach it. Everything about this pandemic has forced us to rethink how we approach things. First of all, the relationship with China, which we can talk about later, but is going to be much more complicated because the way in which the Chinese state managed and mismanaged the pandemic. But also as we've learned new things about how the disease spreads. So we, the United States government, are going to be very supportive of the measures that Greece has taken. Also this effort to reopen. I know a lot of Greek Americans are very eager to see how they will be able to come back to Greece this summer. And I think Greece, as the Prime Minister said, is well positioned to take a larger share of a smaller pie, but to do so in a way that looks after both the safety of visitors, but also the safety of Greeks.
Where do you want to go this year?
Oh, I've got a long list. I'm starting with Mani in the next couple of days. We're going to go back to Sifnos, which is a wonderful island. I mean, I really appreciated the advertising campaign about how Greek summer is a state of mind, because I always say I don't think Greeks understand, how special their summer is. So we're very much looking forward to enjoying a Greek summer here, and I hope a lot of American citizens will be able to do the same. But we all have to be disciplined. We continue to respect social distancing, wear masks when you're in confined locations, be smart, which is what Greece has done so far.
Mm-hmm. At the same time, overall about the investment environment, Greece is facing some issues now. We have the possibility of a lockdown anytime. The economy is facing some problems because of the post-COVID era. How do you evaluate Greece's efforts and the government's efforts to evaluate the business momentum for making business and for the U.S. investments?
So obviously the coronavirus has created a global shock. It was a setback to the U.S. economy, a setback to the Greek economy, but to everybody else as well. The good news now is that we've all begun the process of reopening. I think all of the things that made Greece a compelling investment target before COVID is still the case today. Greece, like everybody else, is going to have to work a little bit harder, I think, to make the case. But this government's demonstrated commitment to an agenda of reform. I talked earlier about how impressively the government moved out. And I think if you look at Prime Minister Mitsotakis' first 100 days and the record of legislative implementation there in terms of tax reform, in terms of streamlining investment. We've worked very closely with Minister Georgiadis. I very much share his hope that we'll all be down at Hellenic with bulldozers sometime this summer. I've been talking about the Hellenic project for 4 years now, since my arrival in Greece.
About this, what signal Hellenic will send to the markets?
I think it sends two signals. One, it's an enormous investment project in a critically important tourism sector, $1 billion more or less, just for the integrated resort complex. And then it also demonstrates that this government can cut through the Gordian knot of bureaucracy that has been the biggest impediment to investment in Greece. It's similar to the success that we marked in December with the relaunch of the Syros shipyards. Again, a project with American investment in a sector that was traditionally one of Greece's strengths, and an enterprise that had been strangled by Greek bureaucracy. Now Syros is back in business. I saw a photograph from somebody who was in Syros a week ago. There were 5 ships. All the dry docks were full. The piers were filled up. The Syros shipyard is oversubscribed. We're working on the project now around Elefsina. So I think the areas in which Greece will excel are going to be the areas where Greece has traditionally been strong. Tourism, logistics, maritime. There are a couple of pillars that we've added to the equation over the past few years. Energy is one, and we can talk about that later. And that's going to continue to grow, helped by the Prime Minister's ambitious goal of eliminating lignite power by 2028. And then the new area, as I mentioned earlier, is technology.
On this, what's the prospect? We have a new project with the excellence centers in Thessaloniki. What's the prospect of the high tech, taking advantage of the Greek talents?
So Greece has fantastic human capital. It has a very strong educational tradition. The startup sector has traditionally been impeded by the government. And I remember 4 years ago, one of my first meetings that I did in Greece, and I came to this job as a Californian, somebody familiar with Silicon Valley, excited about this technology stuff. And I met here at the residence with a group of young technology entrepreneurs. And I asked them a question: what do you need from the government? And they answered instantly. They all said, just stay out of our way.
Okay.
Now you have a government which is favorable to technology. The Prime Minister has talked about using the Eurozone recovery funds to accelerate the digital transformation of the Greek economy. Investments like the applied materials investment in Think Silicon in Patras, or Microsoft's investments here in artificial intelligence, or what Pfizer is doing with an artificial intelligence center in Thessaloniki.
Cisco, Tesla.
They all demonstrate that there's a value proposition that Greece provides. You just have to create the enabling environment. And what's interesting to me is, and you mentioned the Tesla example, which is a really compelling one. It's a small operation, but their talent base is composed of Greek engineers who are working outside in the United States, in Sweden, in Australia, and they've come back because they want to work for Tesla, but they're very happy to be in Greece because, we're in Athens. It's 330 days of sunshine, wonderful culture, wonderful environment. The impediment in the past was government, and that's starting to change.
And the globalization helps this. In terms of the reforms, is it something that you want to see more working in order to for Greece to create a more business-friendly environment for U.S. investments?
So I think that's more a question for Greeks and for the Greek government. We have seen significant progress. I mentioned tax reform earlier. I mentioned administrative reforms. The improvement in terms of intellectual property rights is very important to technology investment. I can promise you the reason that Microsoft has been willing to come back to Greece in such a big way is because of the steps that the government took towards the improvement of its intellectual property policies for software and for technology products. So this is an area where the government itself, I think the greatest pressure is coming from inside the government. I know, talking to Minister Georgiadis, they're not finished yet in terms of the investment climate. I know, talking to Minister Perakakis, he has a very ambitious agenda for continued progress on digital transformation. I'm very excited the fact that Minister Perakakis, on his advisory council, he has former President Ilves, and there are a lot of lessons that Greece can take from the Baltic countries in terms of how to go digital in a big way. And what's been interesting about this digital shock that the government introduced around the coronavirus lockdown is that it's shown to people that you can take this leap in a way that not only makes government more efficient, but also makes it easier for citizens, more responsive to citizens. So this is one of the silver linings of this COVID crisis has been how it has helped to accelerate this process. But we very much hope to see continued movement there. I think the other area is in terms of regulatory approval. So all of these projects that we're working on, whether it's Elefsina in the energy sector, I know, talking to the Minister of Energy and his team, they're constantly working the tensions over environmental licensing and areas like wind power and solar, which will be very important to the future of the Greek economy. It's crazy that Germany, which does not have the weather of Athens or the weather of Greece, has a higher penetration of renewables than Greece has. And that's because of regulatory impediments. And I think Minister Hatzidakis has made great progress there, and a lot of American companies have responded.
Now, about the two strategic priorities defined by DFC as strategic priorities, Elefsina shipyard and Alexandroupolis. What's the real projects, the real prospects after the COVID era?
So COVID has provided a short-term shock, but it doesn't change the long-term strategic interest of the United States or our engagement in Greece. We were very pleased in December that the US Congress passed an amendment to the authorizing legislation for the Development Finance Corporation, which empowers DFC to be engaged on projects in Greece, a high-income country, but projects with strategic import. So the two that we're focused on, as you mentioned, one is Elefsina, which is relatively easier because it takes a template we already know from the Syros shipyard and looks at how to take a much bigger complex, the Elefsina complex, and bring it back to life. So those negotiations are proceeding well. There's the piece involving the government, the discussions between the Greek state and the current owner of the shipyard. And then there's my piece, which is the role of the Development Finance Corporation, the role of Onyx, which is the American company which is engaged, and the role that the larger U.S. and the interest the larger U.S. government has in ensuring that a strategic asset like this shipyard does not go to one of our great power rivals. Alexandroupolis is bigger because what you're really looking at is a whole complex of projects. You've got the floating regasification unit. You have the IGB pipeline, which is moving ahead. You have the privatization of the port. You have the gas storage at Kavala. The emergence of Alexandroupolis as a major logistics hub, both for moving material and goods into the Black Sea region, but also as a gateway to the Western Balkans, helping to advance our goal of energy diversification for all of these countries from Bulgaria to the west that are largely dependent on Gazprom right now. So both are priorities. I think Elefsina is closer to fruition, in part because I know Minister Georgiadis, he's got his own political bulldozer, and he's using that to move the project ahead. But the interest from the United States government has been made very clear and is very strong. We've had repeated engagements between Development Finance Corporation leadership and the Greek state. And we hope very much that in the same way that last December we celebrated the renaissance, the coming back to life of the Syros shipyard, we'll be able to do the same in Elefsina during the weeks ahead.
So both sides, as I can see, try to keep up the business momentum, even though there are difficulties, volatility, uncertainties.
No, I think that's exactly right. You know, capital has to go somewhere. Greece presents a lot of opportunities. Our focus at the embassy, you know, for a couple of months, like everybody, we were completely focused on the health emergency. And I'm very proud of the partnership that we had with Minister Kokilias and everybody on the Greek side working that side of the equation. Now we're shifting a lot of our focus to the economic recovery. And I think, you know, Greece has as good a chance as anybody of enjoying a real V-shaped recovery, in part because of the reputational gains that it will enjoy because of its sound management of the COVID crisis. I mean, look at Fareed Zakaria's interview yesterday with the Prime Minister, and this, you know, I know it's sometimes people in Athens forget, but most of the world doesn't spend its days thinking about Greece.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, Greece is a positive headline.
Yeah,
it's
right.
not.
It's one of the first little times I can see that Greece is an epicenter for a good
news story, a good news story. Not a crisis.
You're right,
and we all want to hold on to that and leverage it.
Okay, sure. Let's move on to Turkey, because there are some uncertainties because of the Turkish provocations. Greece is trying with diplomatic means to cope up with the Turkish provocations. With Italy, trying now with Egypt. Do you think it's enough that what Greece is doing with the international law?
So let me say a couple of things. First of all, on the economic issues that we've been talking about, I do not see the Turkey concerns as a significant disincentive to the opportunities that Greece presents economically. And in fact, you continue to have significant Turkish investment in Greece in sectors like tourism. So you know, that we can put off to the side. We are, Greece and the United States, both of us, strongly interested in helping to ensure, first and foremost, that Turkey remains anchored in the West. It is in none of our interests to see Turkey drift away from NATO. And we want to see Turkey and Greece have an ally-like relationship, which means respect for international law, which means resolution of issues through dialogue and not unilateral actions. We have been very supportive of the approach that the Prime Minister has taken, his effort to continue to build dialogue, including on the difficult issues like energy. I think it's very important that Minister Hatzidakis continues to send such a clear message that Greece wants an open architecture for energy issues in the Eastern Mediterranean, but an open architecture built on principles of international law. You know, on the immediate concerns around things like Libya, the United States has invested in Greece as a pillar of regional stability. My visit to Suda Bay on Friday was a reminder of how important Greece is as a stabilizing factor in an era in what we're focused on is great power competition. The role of Russia in Syria, the role of Russia in Libya, the role of Russia in the Black Sea, the emergence of China as a factor in the Eastern Mediterranean, how we work together on all of those issues. So the United States is interested, like Greece is interested, in having the Turkey issue be managed in a way that doesn't detract from the Prime Minister's focus, which is investment, growing the economy, driving economic growth, and leveraging the fantastic opportunities that Greece should have going forward, both as a successful member of the Eurozone, but also as Europe's gateway to the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East. I think I should have said earlier, and it reminds me, I want to reiterate the point. I think we talked about the coronavirus dynamic across Europe. I think one of the things that's really striking to me is how through this crisis, Greece has basically become a normal Eurozone economy.
Yeah.
Nobody is worrying about the stability of the banking system. Nobody is talking about Greece leaving the Eurozone, these are all the issues. When I came to Athens 4 years ago, these were the questions that people were asking. Nobody's asking those questions anymore. So that's progress.
Okay, now on Turkey again. You don't want me to tell you how Greece is counting on the US support. You have the sense, in your conversations every day. The question is to what extent Greece could count on the US support. I know that you personally and the bureaucracy is trying hard, but the United States is facing its interior problems, domestic problems, and is in a pre-election campaign period. To what extent Greece could count on the United States?
The United States is absolutely committed to our alliance relationship with Greece. The bilateral relationship today is stronger than it's ever been. It's a relationship which is supported by Republicans and Democrats. We benefit from the fact that all of these engagements that I talked about earlier, I know Secretary Pompeo, Secretary Ross, these key players in the administration all appreciate Greece, the value that the Greece relationship provides to the United States, but the complicated environment that Greece lives in. There's an open channel of communication whenever it's needed. I think we benefit also from the fact that, as you say, as we came into an unexpectedly complicated 2020 in the United States, and you've got the elections complication, which we knew we would confront, then the pandemic complication, and now these issues of race, which are very difficult. But as I said last week when I was visiting with the president of your parliament, the United States is a great power. We have consistently demonstrated over the years that despite whatever challenges our domestic democracy has to work through, we will continue to stand by our international obligations, and we will continue to work with our international partners to advance our shared interests. So I think Greece can be very confident of the quality of the relationship with the United States today and the breadth of the relationship, that it's a relationship which goes beyond political parties. None of us want to get to a crisis in terms of the situation in the Eastern Mediterranean. We also need to work with our allies. And I know the Prime Minister has been very focused on working with his European allies. Greece did that very effectively during the standoff in Evros. The presence of President von der Leyen and the rest of the European leaders making clear that this migration issue is not a Greece-Turkey thing, but a Europe-Turkey thing was very important. And in the same way, I know, there will be an opportunity. In fact, I think it's today, as Foreign Minister Dendias goes to Paris, and we'll talk with Secretary Pompeo. And Secretary Pompeo will be, the message will be, yes, will be part of the larger because video. Turkey will be one of the issues. Of course it will be. And I think the symbolism of the fact that Foreign Minister Dendias will be speaking not from his office here in Athens, but from Paris next to his French counterpart is also very important. Okay, Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for this chat. No, thank you. It's really good to catch up, and I'm glad we're able to do this in the context of the ATHEX and AmCham Roadshow, which is such an important part of our effort to support Greece's return to economic growth. I hope you're here next year as well. And let's do it in Santorini. Exactly. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
We thank the US Ambassador and Mr. Papathanasiou very much for sharing so interesting views on such hot issues for Greece with us. Now I would like to welcome Mrs. Vasiliki Lazaragou, Chair of the Hellenic Capital Market Commission, who will speak about the Greek capital market.
Thank you, Mrs. Papastarou. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning to New York. It is an honor and great pleasure to participate in the 9th roadshow of the Athens Exchange. And actually, the Hellenic Capital Market Commission, as the supervisor of the market operator of the Athens Exchange, has traditionally been participating in the roadshows, given that this is a forum that raises awareness to international investors about the Greek listed entities and the Greek capital markets in general. So our duty as a regulator is to present such relevant capital markets framework and advice on the initiatives that we will undertake in relation to the Greek market. So I will not address any issues relating to the Greek economy in general, given that these have all been covered very sufficiently by all the experts before. So I will focus mainly on the Greek capital market developments and try to give a picture of the environment. So starting from 2019, actually the second half of 2019, I need to say that it was a period marked by the increase in capital market capitalization and the returns of most main and sectoral indices of the Athens exchange, classifying it among the top performing exchanges worldwide, as Mr. Socrates Lazaridis said in the beginning. The substantial drop in the government bond yields, as Mr. Patelis also mentioned, the improved trading activity in the stock market, and the net inflows in the Greek mutual fund market as a whole for the first time since 2015. So 2019 was a pretty good year. With respect now to 2020, COVID-19, as we all know, had a significant impact on such picture. There has been a decrease in the market capitalization and volatility for a while in the bond yields, which, however, have now returned to the levels of the end of 2019. It remains, however, to be seen how developments will evolve in the coming months. We have all heard all the steps that are going to be taken for the economic recovery and for the support of the real economy. So it remains to be seen how this will evolve. Now, I need to say that we have all experienced unprecedented circumstances in all markets. And let me say that all EU regulators have been coordinating their actions in relation to a great number of issues concerning our markets and the impact, of course, of COVID-19. Actually, as far as the Hellenic Capital Market Commission is concerned, I would like to point out that we succeeded in implementing in a very short period of time all necessary systems and procedures in order to be able to operate remotely. We managed to continue our monitoring without any interruption and work closely with our peers in ESMA and the other national authorities. Now, having said that, I would like to point out that the Greek capital markets operate on the basis of the European Union capital market legislation. Actually, this is a case in all member states, given that most of the legislation regarding capital markets is generated at an EU level and is either applied directly, as this is the case in regulations, which is actually the trend right now, or through incorporation into national laws, which is the case of directives. So this allows the cross-border provision of services and circulation of products among the EU. You are all aware, of course, of the MiFID II and EMIR and other similar examples and regulations that are applied in all EU member states. Thus, we are speaking for a very well-harmonized framework. The duty and the mission of each EU regulator is to ensure compliance with EU legislation and practice, and of course, the protection of investors. From our part, as the Greek, from the part of the Greek, as regulators of the Greek capital markets, we have set from the beginning of our term, since September 2019, specific priorities, which I would say I will give three areas, consist mainly of the following three areas. First, the enhancement of prudential supervision. Second, the leverage of new technologies. And three, forwarding proposals to amend existing legislative and regulatory framework with respect to specific important issues where we have room for such national legislation, such as, for example, the corporate governance. Mr. Patelis mentioned earlier about the corporate governance. So let me say two things about this, because this is one of the latest proposals that was put forward by the Hellenic Capital Market Commission, which is actually, as I mentioned before, our third priority. So a new law on corporate governance, which modernizes the current framework and enhances specific mechanisms of the Greek listed companies, is going to be enacted very soon. So this includes the operation, for example, the operation and the composition of the board, the independence criteria of the relevant members. The independence criteria have been increased. There are more independence criteria in the new draft law. The increased role of the independent members of the board of directors, the operation of the internal audit, and others. I want to note that for HMC, for the Capital Market Commission, like any other capital market supervisor, monitoring corporate governance arrangements is a key. It is much more than only respecting the interest of the companies and their shareholders. It is also about the ability of the company to take decisions that ensure its sound and prudent operation. So another example of such proposals that were put forward is in relation to prospectuses that can in the future be submitted in English, as well as an adoption of new types of alternative investment funds and others. So also, I want to point out that the Capital Market Commission consolidates European ambitions, such as, for example, sustainable finance, aiming to facilitate flows of capital to support also environmental and social transition of our economies, or another one, the implementation of a European digital strategy for financial services in order to support Greece, as well as Europe's competitiveness, without threatening the stability of the financial sector and the proper functioning of the markets. There are therefore many profound changes with respect to the capital market sector that are taking place currently, which reshape the capital markets landscape, and thus the challenges for the regulator are immense. I will just mention some: financial and technological innovation, new business models, complexity of trading techniques, the trend of supervisory convergence in Europe, the new instruments made available by MiFID II, the enhancement of the national legislatures, such as corporate governance rules. We are all right now in the Capital Market Commission, we are currently dealing with all these issues. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm totally convinced that Greece can increase its market share in the EU to build further the confidence of the investors in the Greek economy and the capital markets. Our mission as the regulator is to ensure transparency and compliance in alignment with the European Union legislation, and at the same time to have a financial Greece fit for tomorrow's challenges and strong on the European Union and international scheme. Thank you very much and enjoy the conference.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lazarakou, for the interesting insights about the Greek capital market that you shared with us. Now I would like to call Mr. George Handzi-Nikolaou, Chairman of the Athens Stock Exchange, Piraeus Bank, and the Hellenic Bank Association, to wrap up the briefing session for the closing remarks.
Thank you, Peggy. We are all very pleased to be here, even if we conduct all those meetings through the WebEx, and participate in this virtual US roadshow. This is an important market for all the investors, the US, I mean, being the largest pool of funds globally. There are funds here in this market for everybody and for everything. It is important, therefore, that we showcase our country, its achievements over the past few years in achieving fiscal balance and making progress on all important fronts, but also its achievements over the past few months, which speaks volumes about the government's determination to move the country to a new era. And yes, there are attractive investment opportunities here in Greece, as it can be seen from the record number of investors, as Mr. Lazaridis outlined, who are prepared to meet the listed Greek companies which participate in the roadshow in order to find and get updates from them. It is also an opportunity for those Greek companies to get the attention of the US investors and register all the progress which is being made in the country through their eyes as they conduct business in Greece. And this is happening in an environment where for a very long time, the first time in a long time, we have seen that we are operating with a pro-business government, a reliable government which has instilled and continues to do so trust among the Greek public. And we all know that trust is a prerequisite for stability and growth. Also, a reform government with an ambitious and fast-moving agenda, as we've heard from the officials, but also an ambitious digitalization agenda, which is the prime weapon, I will call it, against red tape, which we all know Greece suffers a little bit. We also had the opportunity to hear from Mr. Saikouras his plans for primarily for dealing with the COVID-19 and his steady handling of the finances of the country at this critical point. Also, Mr. Georgiadis, the so-called the troubleshooter in charge, as I think Mr. Patelis characterized him, outlined all the important investment projects which are underway. There are several of them, as you have seen from the list of the projects that he commented on. Mr. Patelis also commented on a variety of important economic fronts, including the opportunities offered to Greece from the new recovery fund, which is under discussion, and the commitment from the government to utilize those funds guided by the experts in the best possible way. And Mr. Payat, who for one more time reiterated the excellent state of the US-Greek relationships and all the opportunities he sees in Greece for US investors, while at the same time highlighting the role of Greece as a stabilizing force in the region and the role of Greece as, among other things, emerging as a regional energy hub. On Vasiliki Vadlazarakou, the chair of the Hellenic Capital Market Commission, we heard the HCMC's plans for a number of reforms, particularly on the front of corporate governance, which for most investors is a prerequisite to invest in a particular company, as well as the other plans for establishing more transparency and compliance in the Greek capital market. So these are all, I would say, good announcements from the official sector plus participants, and we look forward for a successful conduct of all those discussions, and with the hope that they will resonate among the US investors, and we will see for first time important and significant FDI flowing into Greece. Good luck to all involved. Thank you.
We would like to thank Mr. Hadjinicolaou, our distinguished speakers, and all of you for attending our briefing session, which has come to its end. We do apologize for the bad sound during Minister Staikoura's speech, but the script of his speech will be shortly uploaded on this link. Finally, we would like once more to thank our gold sponsors, Alpha Finance, Eurobank Equities, Morgan Stanley, NBG Securities, Optima Bank, and Piraeus Securities, as well as our silver sponsor, Deloitte, for making this forum achievable. And we urge you to keep safe, and we are looking forward to welcome you all soon to Greece. See you all at our next forum, hopefully physically in New York. Thank you.